Oh, there you are, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. Hey, in this episode, you're going to want to hang tight. We're going to discover what it takes to build teams without the friction. So, just hang tight, buckle up because it's time to wake up and embrace.
Did you say hang tight?
Hang tight. Just sit. Just watch.
All right, here we go.
Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. They've been hanging tight this whole time, Nick. I'm Ryan Morris, co-creator of the 12 Journeys and Wake Up with Giants TV. And I'm releasing a chapter in a book. It's coming out in April-ish. If I can ever get my chapter done, it's coming out. And Nick, you can see in the background, is he wrote. I was going to say he's writing. It's already written. It's wrote.
It's wrote.
It's been wrote.
It's wrote and it's woke.
He wrote a new book called The Tortoise's Hair, and we'll be launching a Kickstarter in the first part of March 10th. 310. Look up the synchronicity on that. That's freaking awesome. And he is the author of The Giants and the Smalls. And right now we are right in the middle of Sum Gigante 9. And we'll be doing a wait list for Sum Gigante 10. So if you'd like details about that, you can find us on Facebook. A Tribe of Giants, message us, and we can put you on that list for when that starts. February 22nd, we'll be with doTERRA, and we'll be doing a live book reading with their executives and their leadership team. And then if you want us to come to your executive or leadership team, let us know. We'd love to come out and have a conversation. What else do we have going on, Nick?
Well, we got a new newsletter that we just started.
Yes.
And so if you go to giantsandsmalls.com, up in the top left corner, if you're on the computer, plug into that, because we do blog posts. We're going to share blog posts, connections to these videos, what's going on in the world of the Giants, all kinds of stuff. Thank you, Jesus.
I think he's excited we're finally on.
We're here. Well, let's dive in. I'm going to introduce our guest, but that's it so far. We got that newsletter and all the upcoming events. I think on the 20th we're doing a live intro to the 12 Journeys. So
yeah, the 20th on Facebook.
Correct. Yep. Nothing to pay for. Just show up. That's it.
Cool.
Okay, so we've got Valerie. Valerie, help me with your last name. Is it Trapunsky?
Perfect. You did a great
Yes, I did it. So she's the founder and CEO of ChatterBoss, and that is the first and only remote executive assistant service of its kind. And her mission is to guide entrepreneurs to building frictionless teams using a human-centric approach. With over a decade of experience working as a top-level assistant for A-list celebrities, and as the chief of staff for high-net-worth individuals and CEOs, Valerie has developed a passion for effective problem solving and is committed to bringing the same level of excellent service to solo entrepreneurs and small business owners. And we're lucky enough to have her here today. So Valerie, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here.
You're welcome. We're going to dive into your story, your philosophy, and we'll talk about what you're up to as well. But how did this all begin? If you go back in time to your awakening to this, I want to be an assistant, I want to do this. Maybe it wasn't that, but go back in time and tell us how this all began.
Yeah, I think that, all of our journeys, when we look backward, right, there is a story to tell, but in the moment, it's not this thought out plan a lot of the time. And so I started my career in advertising. I thought that I would be a CEO of an advertising agency. That was my plan. But as we know, right, man plans and God or the universe laughs, right? And so I got an opportunity to interview as a personal assistant. It was not something that I had an interest in, but it was something that kind of came along. And what happened was the only interview question was, hey, do you have a boyfriend? And I was like, this is exactly the kind of job that I thought that this was, right? and this is not for me. But really the question was, do you have a passport? And do you have to ask someone if you have to travel at a moment's notice? And I was 23 years old at the time. And so that was super exciting. I had an opportunity to become a personal assistant and ended up being a chief of staff. And I had that role for 3 years. I got to travel the world. And then from there, I stayed within this niche, but I had a passion for entrepreneurs. I had a passion for business. And so eventually that led to starting ChatterBoss. And that's been a really, really fun chapter.
Yeah. So let's talk about you a little bit within that. So did you always feel as confident as you do today? Were there some things that were in the way that maybe had you feel a little bit small when it came to what you were taking on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. I think that there is so much conversation right now about imposter syndrome and how to cure imposter syndrome. And I think that the truth is that the nature of us as human beings is that we're always going to have these thoughts in our mind, right? Can I do this? Am I good enough? Right? Is this challenge that, something that I can solve? So I think certainly that was there at the beginning, that's still there today in various degrees, right? What I like to say is that I've never had a company of the size that it is today. And hopefully a year from now, I will have never led a company of that size. And so there is this, consistent kind of challenge, but it's also really, really fun.
Yeah. How do you overcome that? So you have, and I love that you have imposter syndrome. I have it every day, even right now, which is awesome. But how do you manage that? How do you manage intense emotions? Because what we want to highlight here is how those that are viewing this can see themselves in your journey and how that's a possibility for them. It might look different, but we all are humans. Like you said, a human-centric approach.
Yeah.
Like, how does the humanness play into what you're talking about here, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, I love it. And I really love what you said, right? That like you're experiencing it right now. I think that for audiences, I think for individuals that are, on any kind of a journey, it's really helpful, especially people that are tuning in, that are excited about you, right? That know you and that cannot even imagine, right, that you experience that. So I just want to say, I think that that's really cool for you to kind of name it in the moment. I honestly, I think that what grounds me a lot of the time is connection to other people. Is sometimes what you can say to somebody else is really hard to say or believe for yourself. And so sometimes if I'm having a really hard moment, I try to speak to myself like I would speak to one of my closest friends, right? Someone that I'm trying to give a pep talk to, right? One of my team members in whom I see so much light and in whom I see so much potential and in whom I see so much creativity. And so sometimes, we have to be kind enough to ourselves as we are to others.
Yeah. Now, with what you're doing, you're helping bring virtual assistants to just people like me and Ryan, right? Just average people, right? Or businesses, entrepreneurs, and you can do high level teams as well. But why is that important? Why do people need that? What have you found?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? When you look at a business, the very first thing, as soon as you kind of give birth to your idea, is administrative, right? It's like, whoa, there's like this burst of energy, there's this burst of creativity, and then go ahead and get the domain, go ahead and file your agreements and all of that. And so your business inherently has this administrative debt from day one. And what you want to do at every stage of your business is to have that space for your creativity, your zone of genius, and to have, and in order to be able to grow, the main contribution that you as a business owner are bringing, so that is not clouded by the administrative piece. So that is what we do, and what we strive to do as we grow is to give that highest level of service. That, for example, why it was like super rewarding to work with business owners. It was really fun to work with A-list celebrities, right? And people that have a ton of money, a ton of power. But at those levels, it's really expected, right? Your performance is really expected. A lot of the times when you work with small businesses and entrepreneurs, if you give them that level of service, it's almost not expected. So also a little bit of fun to be able to delight in that way. But we all need administrative help because we only have a certain amount of hours in the day.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get back into the creative side here, because this is where I thrive. I love creating. I love coming up with ideas and systems and processes. But when it comes to the administrative stuff, I shut down. I get into this overwhelmed state. And I would imagine that's pretty common. So when people get into overwhelm, and maybe we get off track of the virtual assistant a little bit, but if you can talk from your own philosophies, how do you manage that overwhelm as a creative or as an entrepreneur or as a celebrity, right? How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Sometimes what I notice when we start to have these like kind of complicated feelings about something, it can come from a place of like, I just don't know how to do this. I'm not confident that it will ever get done. And then we start to layer a bunch of these things. And so if you are a person that is creative, and so I'm a person that's very creative. I'm also a person that's, it's interesting, perhaps we're similar. I can see organizational structure. I'm very good at it. What I'm not good at is actually the execution day to day. And that was not surprising for myself. I knew that about myself, but I actually working as a personal assistant, I felt like that's a part that I have to hide about myself, right? If someone finds out that I hate the administrative execution, right? Surely they're not going to trust me.
You guys heard it. You heard it here first, right?
Nick, hey, spoiler.
Yeah,
I hate
spoiler
that.
alert. Right?
But what's interesting, and a lot of entrepreneurs, they feel like if I expose that about myself, right? If I expose my weaknesses, then other people are going to find out, and then and then I'm not going to be successful. But it's the opposite, right? If you can see organizational structure and you get someone to actually help you with the execution, then that's your superpower, right? Like for example, I have my assistant sometimes just sit and watch my screen as I do something. And I could say, no, I'm just super hyper, efficient. And I complete all of these things. I complete it. It's like some people can see it as a crutch, right? But I see it as my superpower. It's something that's hard for me to do within my character, but I do it with assistance, and then it works really well.
Yeah, I love that, because that's kind of what we do anyway. You take a cell phone, you take a computer, it becomes an extension of us and our creativity. And what I see that doing is like you said, it creates a superpower. It creates this ability to do more in the world. Because if you can focus on your creative ability, then they can do the execution. It's like, here, I know I've got this idea, but getting it out to the world sometimes is the most challenging part, right? Absolutely. I can see with what we've been doing is, over the past 4 years and 13 years since I wrote the book, 14 years since I wrote the book, is that there is so much that goes into a business that as business owners, we take all that on and we're so busy doing the busy stuff that we don't have time to create anymore. And so can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's the reason that you got into your business. And then, if you're catching yourself, I've had this, even though I've always had the support and the help, I've always, as soon as I was able to, started using my own assistants, right? So I had this abundance within the business and a model to go with it. But there have been moments where I was like, I fantasize of closing everything down and going away. And I would have to really audit, is it that I lost passion? Like, is it really that everything that I've worked so hard for was not my passion after all? Or is my day-to-day grinding me so hard in the areas that are not pleasurable that I now have to, that now I've lost that desire, right? And so, and in those moments when I was able to do that audit and delegate out those things, right? And because it's always something new, right? It's not like you have one delegation plan and it stays your whole life, right? You have a delegation plan for 3 or 4 months, and then you have to come up with a new delegation plan.
Yeah, I love that, because like we have this dream and it's like, I can't wait to be an entrepreneur. And then you become the entrepreneur and you're like, I can't wait to retire from this. Can't wait to get away from this, because it's so much work, right? So that learning to delegate really comes back to an awareness of who you are within your organization, within your company. Right. So I want to venture back to that. So if you're unconscious and you just do things automatically and you don't delegate because you have some sense of control, then that lack of awareness could really hurt your business, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so how important is mindfulness around how you show up in your organization? How important is mindfulness for yourself?
I think mindfulness is everything as an entrepreneur and as a business owner. First of all, because you are in such a position of power, and with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And so you have these individuals that are dependent on you, both your clients and your employees, your contractors. And for me, I find, my mood sets the tone for how everyone experiences their day, their month, their quarter, etc. And
Mm,
so I always say, right, if I'm feeling like I'm on edge, then my job is to go for a walk, is to do some kind of an exercise. But it's better
beautiful.
for me not to show up to a meeting. And that's a luxury, right? Because I've set up my systems and my team in such a way that I can say, you know what, I'm not showing up here. Someone else lead, someone support me here. And I'm going to do what I need so that, if I think as business owners, if we can't contribute positivity, right, then it's better, right? If we don't have something nice, don't say anything at all, right? So it's like the same. If I can't bring that positive energy, I have to take care of myself until I do.
I just drown it with a monster. It's not far off. I mean, it's a monster or something else, but that's the tendency, is to drown it out. But the vulnerability as a leader to share with your team, look, I'm not in a space to even be here right now. So let me go take care of myself. That self-care, Dorothy Inez, who works with us, she talks about self-care a lot and the importance of that. But it's hard to have self-care when you don't know what's going on. And so there's a self-awareness that needs to happen first. And then once you have that, then you can do that self-care. And you mentioned walking. What are some other ways that you take care of yourself when you're out of your energy, when you're out of your creativity?
Yeah. You know what I have recently heard that was, it felt like not like an innovation, but it really felt like one.
Yeah.
Um, I meditate. I try to meditate in the morning and in the evening, but I've heard of that you can actually, if you have like 60 seconds between a Zoom call, you can actually meditate. And I never thought, wow, 60 seconds, right? I feel like I need to like go into something deeper. You can actually just like sit and take a few breaths, like what I'm finding, right? And that's for everyone. I also, everything that I say for like self-care for myself, I then also extend to my team.
Okay.
And I don't know, I find that breathing, like no matter what, like if you take a deep breath, you cannot feel, and this is speaking as a person with like insane anxiety, right? I have like 100 out of 100 anxiety at all times. But I notice in the moment that I'm breathing deeply, right, it goes away, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
that opportunity.
There's a thing I saw the other day where you look to the right as far as you can. So you put your body forward and you look to the right, and then you look to the left, and then you straighten your head and you put your arms behind your head and you look right and look left, and it does a reset on the vagal nerve, the vagus nerve. So it allows your body to recalibrate.
Yes.
And that's another way, like breathing. I can relate to the anxiety. I had a decade of anxiety and I still feel it most days, but there's this learning how to manage it.
Yes.
And I would imagine with teams, especially when you're leading teams, is recognizing that we're all working with humans and that humans are going to do human things, which include, having anxiety, having depression, being sad about life, things like that. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely right. There are what I find is that there are positive and negative stressors, obviously that affect us, right? But you're right. Sometimes as as a leader, we're focused on efficiency, and we always like, no matter how by nature, let's say you are human centric, right? Not all of us are, right? We all have our strengths and weaknesses. For example, I'm not analytical, but I'm super human centric, and so I have to actively force myself to do things that are analytical, right? Otherwise, like what I'm doing makes no sense at all. But for some people, but for some people, it's like really easy to see the human aspect, and even still. We're focused on efficiency. We're focused on our KPIs, right? At the end of the day, we have like the business has to pay the bills. And so sometimes it's easy to slip into like seeing people as like production machines, and we all get that. And so, including looking at ourselves, right? So we always have to take a step back. So those positive and negative stressors, right? Like I've seen people really derail their performance when like something bad happens, right? In their lives, like health, family related, but also when something really positive, right? Like someone is planning a wedding, right? Like they just had a baby, right? These amazing things that happen. But what I found on our teams is that when you hire right, like I know that I brought on the right person, you're my right person, then everyone should have like credits, right? That like you're gonna go through like these like low moments where you're not producing and the rest of the team carries you. And then you shouldn't feel guilty about that, because then you're gonna go into hyper efficiency mode at some point, right? And then you're gonna end up carrying someone else. Like, so we have this like team mentality. We always carry each other, and we try not to tell ourselves like, I'm not gonna feel guilty that I'm going through like the down part of the roller coaster right now, right? Because everyone goes through it.
Yeah. Ryan, I'm glad you put the definition of KPI on. I thought it was key lime pie index.
It is. It is.
I was way off. Yeah.
Nick, you hired right too.
I hire right.
Yeah. You hired right.
And that's what business owners do, is they hire the person for their skills, but they get the whole human. Yeah. And there's everything that's going on behind the scenes. And I would imagine your anxiety gives you a level of empathy and compassion. There's some research that says that too much empathy can actually be damaging for the person that's empathetic, because we take on other people's emotions, but that can also re-traumatize them and cause further issues. So it's a balancing of compassion and empathy. What do those words mean to you, that compassion and empathy, and how do you implement that in your organization?
I'm really loving this conversation, because it's like it's a lot of the things that I was like specifically thinking about this morning. So it's
cool.
It's really cool to talk.
When I got my psych degree, I could read minds. It was the weirdest thing, just all of a sudden. So yeah.
What am I thinking, Nick?
I have no idea. I'm just messing. I lied. I feel like an imposter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, keep going. You're doing good.
Empathy.
Ask the question again. The balance between
empathy and compassion. Like, being able to suffer with people, compassion, right? Versus understand what their emotions might be like, but also take those on, right? Yeah.
I think that as a leader, where I get into dangerous territory with empathy, because I'm highly empathetic, right? Like too much to the other side of the scale. And where that gets me is that sometimes I see the reason or the pain behind certain actions. And then it's very hard for me to give feedback, because I have a reason. I understand why, right? I can make a why for absolutely everything. But if I don't give you the feedback that you need in the moment that you need it, you cannot improve. And then that ends up kind of staggering.
I want to hang on this for a minute. Okay. So you have empathy for what they're feeling, but that brings up stuff within you that gets in the way of you providing feedback. So sometimes their trigger becomes our trigger, and then our trigger gets in the way of serving them, right?
We might have like too big of a friendship, right? This is important. You have like too much of a friendship, so you don't want to. You just kind of empathize in that and let them kind of get away with more than they probably would have normally, maybe as well.
I think I'm so hard on myself, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like they get to their success by almost these like negative, motivators, right? And like we're really hard on ourselves and we're perfectionists. And so because I am so sensitive to that and I'm so hard on myself, for example, then it's hard for me to receive feedback, right? So then it's almost like it's a projection, right? Because it's hard for me and I'm sensitive to it. I then imagine that everyone operates in the same way, and it's not true. And even if yes, right, I still desire feedback. I still need it, right? I still grow from it. So withholding it from others, right, you're actually stunting their growth. So
yeah, I'm glad that you're bio kind of says frictionless, not friction free, because it really is reducing that friction. And part of that reducing of the friction is that understanding of what it might be like over there in that world. But I can also imagine with your assistants, the same thing. Like if they have this understanding, you know how they operate in their world and they know how your clients operate in their world, it creates it reduces friction, right? It reduces that because there's some empathy, compassion, understanding, but also there's a getting the job done at the same time, right?
And then helping that person, to be able to move through it and give them enough rope that they can go and perform. I worked for a company that it was all about shaming you into like performance and threatening, shame and threaten, and there was always this like pit in your stomach, and then no feedback, and they just sat in their little golden tower and pointed fingers, and then when you needed help or something like that, they just shame you. Well, why aren't you doing this? And look at this other person that's doing this, and you're not doing this, and they didn't take a look at the person behind the stuff and what was going on in your world, and then give you some real world help, like to be able to come into your office, sit down with you, talk, and then how can we move through this together? There's none of that.
Yes.
So it can be super detrimental.
There could be detriment too to your future in any other business, because now you're projecting what happened into the present situation. And so it becomes this remembered presence of what was, even though that's not the case anymore. So I think as team members too, we have a responsibility to be aware of where we are and what projections we have into the organization from past experiences, because that might not be happening right now, right? What did that bring up for you? I saw your face light up. You're like, yes.
No, I love that you say this, because I kind of, what we've found is this miscommunication or dysfunctional communication cycle between entrepreneurs and assistants, or between individuals. And what's really painful about it, right, is that like there's like some start event, and then there's a response, and then it's like this continuous thing until eventually it falls apart, or it keeps going, which is probably worse, right? When communication isn't working very well, but we keep, we stay at it. And, for me, I notice it's sometimes the entrepreneur is bringing something into the space from their past experience, right? Like, so they got burned, someone didn't execute, they stole their data, right? And so now they're like really, they're bringing that energy into this communication. Or the assistant, the service provider, had a really bad experience with a previous client, employer, and they got really burned. And now they're bringing this constant anxiety into those communications. And what we try to do is like help both parties, when we're talking about reducing friction, figure out like what actually happened, right? Is this something in this dynamic, or is this something that you guys are bringing in from before?
Yeah, holy cow, dude, it's like a relationship. You're talking about relationships here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do it everywhere. It's the social connection that we all have as humans. It is human-centric. It can't be any other way. And so you have one party over here that brings their past, and this party brings their past, and we're trying to learn how to work together, like Hugh said, work together and walk alongside each other as we move forward. Like, what that does too is it balances out the power. Like, the assistant isn't less powerful than the contractor or the client, nor the other direction, right? They're working side by side so that they can both meet their dreams and goals. Because I would imagine that assistant has goals that are just as big, right, respectively, as the person that they're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And there is this conversation, right, in the industry that, who is an assistant, right? And there's unfortunately still this kind of like stigma, right? Like, assistants are task doers. This is like a less than kind of a position. And what we're doing with ChatterBoss is I really believe that an assistant is one of the most powerful positions within the organization. You get to be the right hand of the individual that you are supporting. And so we're really working on elevating the reputation, what is the reality of assistants, but also why we're talking, right? Like, why is it like in this space of like, you're like, it's relationships, right? It's communication, because I find that with assistants, it's not the kind of role that, for example, I come in and I need bookkeeping. That's still a relationship, but there are certain templates, right? There's like certain expectations. With an assistant, it can go in so many different directions, and it really depends on who you are, how you communicate, how I communicate. And then that role is like such a shapeshifter role. And for that reason, we so over index on personality and communication and those relationships for success.
Yeah. So we talk about the 12 journeys, and the first 6 journeys are all the internal stuff. And I feel like we've hit that pretty well. Your clients, your assistants, your team members, they all have this version internally that's going on. And then that gets projected out here. But when we go from that and we get into a space where we're feeling good enough and we start looking into the unknown and what we're going to create together, and we start imagining and dreaming, there really is nothing written out here. And so the goal, like you say, is to bring these two together and have them create that collectively together, right? So how do you face uncertainty, and what is your philosophy behind the unknown, the things you can't see?
Yeah, I love that. I like to give advice to both assistants and entrepreneurs to lead with grace and lead with kindness, right? Like all of the things that we know, and maybe it's cheesy, right? But just to what we do at the beginning when we do the match is that we put the client and the assistant through a character assessment, and then we share the results of that assessment with the other. So you step into the relationship, one, trusting that you have the right hire, because we pair, based on the skill set, and we pair on all of like the software and all of like those things that you need, but we also pair based on personality. And we'll say, right, there's no such thing as a perfect match, right? But what you can have is have a good enough indicator, right? We're not going to know all of your behaviors, right? If I say this, you're going to respond to this, but I'm going to have a general sense of the direction of like what I can expect from you. If we can know that about each other and step into that relationship where like, I know this is your weakness, I don't have to keep pressing into that weakness, right? I know what I'm going to discover there. And so that's what I find when we know what we're getting and we can keep that top of mind, then the relationship goes smoother.
Okay. Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize winner, talks about the term satisficing, which is sufficient for the task and satisfies the need. It's basically good enough. Like what you just said, there is no perfection. And I think too many of us look for that perfect fit or that perfect plan or whatever. And sometimes, this satisfies the need. It's sufficient to get the task done. Let's go. Right. And so I think you hit on that pretty well. So when you're bringing people together, it's not going to be a perfect match ever, because again, we're dealing with humans. Humans are like fingerprints, and their values are like fingerprints. They're all over everything they touch. Right. Yeah. So what does that bring up? Did that bring up something else?
Yeah, I think you're never going to have the perfect kind of personality. In fact, right, you don't want it. When we're looking at these kind of pairings, like I like to say, like, and sometimes we have like husband and wife teams for whom we do recruiting, and then so that's really fascinating, right? When you and your partner are very similar, that's great, right? You're going to understand each other. You're going to have a similar worldview. When you and your like chief of staff, or you and your assistant, or you and your business partner are completely the same, right? You're going to then share your same strengths and the same weaknesses. And so sometimes it's intentional friction that we step into, right? That like, I'm choosing you. I already know that like, this is where we're going to differ, but we've both decided to deal with it.
I'm having the vision of pairing like wine with cheese, a certain cheese or a chocolate, right? And so that essentially is what you're doing. Is they're two different things, but you're able to bring them together in this flavor that just works, right? That's powerful.
Yeah, look at Nick and I. Are you the wine or the cheese?
You think you're the cheese? Smell like cheese sometimes.
Beef and cheese.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very similar, very different.
We're totally opposite of each other.
I mean, we drink Monsters. That's the same.
Yeah. But it works well because the energy type, Ryan's very outgoing and he's more the marketer type. I'm very systematic, very reserved. I like to be in my space. I can do these videos because I'm in my own house, right? There's nobody around me. So it's easy. Bald. We're both bald. We do have that in common, right? We wear hats, but that's probably just by being around each other.
Beautiful in beards.
That got up on a sidetrack there. But the going back to the idea of pairing, right? And then, okay, so everything we've done has been around an individual. the individual working on themselves. And then you bring in the dynamic of relationship or the dynamic of a team. And now you've got two people that are moving in the same direction, but they have these different personalities. And so now collectively, they're looking forward at the unknown. They're looking forward at the resources that are around them. We call that the abundance, all the materials or people that they need to make that vision a reality. But then they've got to clarify their vision together. How do you work with people to clarify their vision so that they're both going in the same direction?
I love it. It's a really heavy question, right? So what we do in the virtual executive assistant space, right? Because it's, we kind of talk, right? There could be like a ton of variations based on the personality pairing, but what you really want to be certain on is that you have the experience that you are needing. That's where sometimes people get confused, right? They give grace, like, okay, like we're kind of different, but your expectations of like experience, like that should be really clear, right? So whether you're like hiring full-time or you're bringing on a contractor, we always advise doing a job description or like a real download of like what's actually needed, what's going to be your expectation of that individual. And so that's what we do. Like, so when we connect with clients, we draw out from them what would be their first 6 months, like their plan and their roadmap, and all of their needs, the skills, the experience. That's what's going to be needed. Because that's important. If you have somebody on your team that doesn't have the experience that you need, no matter like the grace or the love that you feel about working with this person, that's going to be an area of frustration. But that always is the responsibility of the entrepreneur. You need to know what your needs are before you start bringing anyone on.
Too much grace. This rhymes, so it's probably not true, but will make you lose the race, right? Like too much grace will make you lose that race. Like you need the skill set too. So there's got to be a level of accountability that, hey, I can give you grace for things that don't go the way that we planned.
Yes.
But too much of that sometimes leads to letting people off the hook, right? A lack of accountability. And so how do you manage that? How do you keep people accountable and give that grace at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question, and kind of like where people get, again, kind of like these complex feelings come up. So what we've designed, for example, one of the tools that we use is a communication scorecard. And so especially if you're a first-time delegator, and what it will do is for you to hand off the task really clearly, and you outline it there, right? So, what's the task, how much time, what's my budget, what are the tools, et cetera, right? So then you're very clear that you're handing off what needs to be done. Then the person takes it, and there's, of course, right, there's always room for miscommunication, but part of this scorecard is what happens if there is some miscommunication. And that's the third step of it, which is you now fill in what actually happened. If you could be very clear, it's like something got right. It's your communication. It's my understanding. It's maybe I just didn't do it right, but you're going to have your answer. And I think that's what's really important, getting really clear on what actually happened so that we're not like imagining a story in either direction, right? Like not saying, oh, this person is terrible, or saying, oh, well, they just had a rough day, right? No, what actually happened and what's the plan so it doesn't happen again. If it's my communication, how can I be clearer? If it's your understanding of it, right? What questions can you ask me in the future? And then we can know if we get the same thing 2-3 times, right? The same thing is happening, then maybe we really do need to make a switch. Maybe we're not the right pairing. Maybe you're good for something else, right? And then we make a change instead of doing the same thing over and over.
Man, there's so much in this, like the team dynamic of the 12 journeys. So the idea of unconsciousness, you're doing something, but you're not really sure what's going on. Then you become aware of it, but not as an individual, as a team. So there's something happening as a team that's unconscious, and then you create the awareness around it. There could be a lot of stories that come up in that, justifications, judgments, shame, all that stuff. Then you move into the journey of grief, which is all about the sadness of it not going your way, which is the opportunity to really look at it for what's happening. Because the measurement between what you say you'll do and what happens, what shows up, is called integrity. The delta is the integrity. But it's not a shame thing. It's just a measurement of, look, this is what we said we would do. This is what happened. What happened in between? Why didn't that happen? Right.
Yeah.
And so go ahead. Yeah. Interrupt me. I'm good.
It's when you said that, right? One of the things that when we look at kind of like what stands in the way of delegation, and so you just really inspired me with that, right? Is that kind of our feelings sometimes, right? Like I get upset when something doesn't go my way. You actually lose kind of like delegation points on that, right? Like delegation mastery decreases when you experience that, even though it's normal, because that feeling of being upset is actually not helpful in that moment, right? It's natural, but it's not helpful. What is helpful is to see it a little bit less personal, but it's hard, right? And say, okay, this is what happened and this is what we actually need to do. So take those feelings out of it. And I think that all of us can,
it's a more neutral view, right? It's like all we're doing is we're taking this thing that happened, putting it on the table, and all of us are looking at it, but it doesn't mean anything about anybody at the table. But it's an opportunity to really look at what's going on here so that we can transform that and transcend that and create it differently. I'm really digging this just because I've thought of this all from the internal journey of one person, but now you bring in the dynamic of 2, 3, 4 people or a team. And now all of that is multiplied by that group, but still the same fundamental principles, right? People have emotions, people have judgments, justifications, they have unconscious ways of being. And so it's up to us as a team to recognize that and not let it get in the way of where we're going, our vision.
And even more responsibility lies on that of the leader, whoever's running that team, or manager, or whoever's in charge, the business owner, because as those feelings come up, or as those hey, this isn't going the way I thought, if they're reactionary in that, that's where that's not helpful, right? That you were talking about there is that sometimes the business owner or the manager will then go in reactionary mode, and then it's you didn't do this, you didn't, and they start pointing fingers. If they can slow that down and then sit with it, then they start realizing they can internalize where the breakdown was, what's going on, or maybe get into even a calm space. Maybe they don't know where the breakdown was, but they can get into a calm space where they can go and have an adult, honest conversation, from understanding too that, hey, this might have been my fault as well. Let's figure out where the gap was, and then close that gap.
I love that, because what I find with that power dynamic of business owners, entrepreneurs working with their teams, is that whatever you say already holds a lot of weight. There's always a little bit of anxiety around whatever you say by other people, because you're the boss, right? And so with that, if you layer on top of that a person who's really reactive, like for example, I am, right? I'm super reactive to whatever happens. I'm very, very urgent. I'm very excitable. This is a part of me that I cannot change, but what I can do is put systems in place. So for example, if before I would see something and write, why did this happen, right? So unhelpful. I've just now activated my team in these ways. I now say, okay, can I write it into my notes? I can say all of the things that are making me anxious about what happened here in these notes. And what I've also found, if I have standing meetings with teams, there's no real true emergency. Very rarely there's a real emergency that needs to be acted on right now, but it is something I need to know that I'll have the opportunity to voice it so it comes out of my head. So I'll either now save it for a conversation, and by then I've calmed down and I realize it wasn't that important, right? Or if I do have to send it, I give myself an hour or two, right? It always takes the edge off and more grounded.
Man, there's a therapy called internal family systems therapy. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's powerful, because what it does is it takes a human and then it looks at the subfolders of that human. Like we have parts of us that have these different personality types based on where we were developing. Well, we do that individually. We have these parts of us that show up in certain situations. Like you might have this part that gets really defensive. That's not you. That's that part of you that does that. So when we're talking to the human, we're talking to that part, not the whole human. And so if you put that over on teams, essentially what it is a living version of that, right? But it's all out here. So you have you as the leader, the CEO, which is responsible for everything that's going on. And then you have these individual parts. And so you have to speak to each individual part about their part in what happened, and so as a leader, it's being willing or being able to separate our emotions and what's going on in here from the whole. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And I love it in the sense that you're saying, right, as it relates to teams, because again, we have that kind of hyper responsibility in our business, but also because of the dynamic, right? And hopefully you've empowered your teams to, say what they're noticing about you as well, right? That there is, I try to have an organization without hierarchy. And so it really kind of puts me at the same level as my team, and we can have these conversations. But again, if we're taking this like extreme responsibility, and like what I love about what you said is that like sometimes when we notice something in ourselves, right? Like, so as a leader, this is really not helpful, right? This part of my personality or this part of my system is really not helpful. And what I've found allows me to give myself more grace if I can look at that as myself like that, right? Like that's not me, right? That's just a voice that's coming at me, right? And I can take the information, I can take what's useful here, but I don't have to identify, right? So for example, I'm hyper competitive, right? And so you can imagine that like what this can bring up in different dynamics. But if I say thank you for that information, and also I don't have to identify that's not really kind of me in my interactions with people, it helps me soften things. So this constant like Tetris, right?
Yeah. It's Tetris. That's a great way to describe it. It's finding the pieces and placing them. I want to talk a little bit about, as teams come together, and whether it's your team as a CEO or your team as an assistant and a client, right? That's a team as well, and that's part of the whole. But when they come together and they determine, look, we have all these resources around us that we can create something with. All of us have that. And then we have this vision of where we're going. We like to play in the world of the double helix of creation. We call it, the surrender and nurture, right? The journeys of surrender and nurture are simply allowing it to play out the way it needs to, allowing the path to emerge the way it needs to, but also acting on whatever path you can think of. So there's this blending of letting go, but also trying to control, right? Yeah. So how do you manage that? And what did that bring up for you as you heard that?
Well, I think in the business, it brings up a lot of things, but I think from the business sense, I find that sometimes entrepreneurs have a hard time, especially, if we have these kind of perfectionistic tendencies, it's really hard to get started. And I find the hardest is just to get started. And sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to get started when I know the perfect path, I know the perfect direction. And it never exists. And we always kind of discover, right, that if you make any choice, right, like any choice is better than not moving in any direction, right? It's better to make the wrong hire than no hire, right? It's the best to make the best hire, right?
Right.
But if between not hiring and like having a subpar hire, right, better start here, because at least you're going to learn. So that comes up a lot in what you were saying, right? Is that if we have to start somewhere, and we're going to learn, and especially when it comes to delegation is a muscle. So you really cannot go wrong, especially if you stay with that expectation of I'm going to learn, I'm going to get better, and then I'll be more efficient down the line.
That right there, what he just said, the fractal, it is a fractal. It's a branching off of you of what you already do. It's a fractal. Go ahead, Ryan. I cut you off.
No, you're good. I was just thinking about subpar hires, and thinking like, if you have an organization, or if you've set this up in a way that, hey, you did make, what would be considered a subpar hire, you also are leaving a space where this person, the subpar hire, can grow into the expectation. Because now, the odds are, or maybe just a little bit lower, but I've watched multiple times in multiple businesses where hire somebody and find out, oh, okay, this isn't exactly what we thought we were getting. But then that person goes into, sometimes they don't, but where they've shift into being the best version of themselves, and growing into the expectation of the group. It's like the rising tide lifts all ships, and they start realizing, oh, I can do this. This is amazing. Oh my gosh. And sometimes they even blow way past your expectations of what your thought of the perfect hire was going to be. Nick?
I like that, because it's, I don't want to be the weak link in something. If I'm in a team, I want to do my part. And I think there's this in a team setting. Some people won't do this, obviously, right? They're just not in alignment with where you're going. But for most people, I think they'll want to catch up. They'll want to learn more. They'll want to develop and grow themselves in a way where they're an addition to the team and they're a vital component of the team, right? And so that like you said, Ryan, that there is opportunity for people to grow, but again, it comes back to the individual. Nobody's coming to grow that person. I can't go to the gym and give you my muscles, right?
That's true too.
So they have to do their work. So if they're not doing their work, coming back to that, it's man, maybe we're not in alignment. Maybe this isn't the space for you right now, right?
Do a little pruning.
Yeah. Valerie, did that?
It feels like a very interesting conversation, right? Because one is, as a leader, you want to create other leaders, and so your words have a lot of weight in those positive areas as well, right? You can discover someone's talent that they are, maybe having their own imposter syndrome that they can't kind of see, that you can clearly see. And those are really beautiful and amazing opportunities within your business. I also, though, caution, right? Because sometimes we feel like this is a great person, right? I like the person, so I hired the human being and they're a match for us in all of the ways. But if it's not, if the role hasn't been clearly defined, and if we haven't, and it's maybe their skill set lies in an area where the business doesn't need, what I've also, again, being such a high empath, I have to also tell myself, right, before my own needs, before everything else, right, before the needs of others, is the need of the business, right? So what I also cannot do is jeopardize the well-being of the business because I fell in love with someone and I want to grow them, but today my resources dictate, like, this is what I need to grow. So those are, for me, very hard decisions.
I like that. Because again, the humanness of it is hard to let somebody go or to tell them, look, it's not a fit, is challenging for anybody, but it's setting aside what's going on in here for you for the goodness or the better for the whole, right? And sometimes we can enable people by telling them they're doing a great job and they're great people and all this stuff, and they consistently show that they can't be counted on, right? And so there's a level of, at what point do you release them? Basically, it's not, you're not firing, you're just like, look, this isn't a fit here, let's release you so you can go do what does fit, right?
And sometimes that, like, look, we all go through like different, right? Like, I don't know, I've been fired before. I don't know about you guys, but actually I've been fired multiple times before. And so I think that that's like what, for a lot of people that go through that experience, that's really a kick in the butt, right? Like, I now know. So if you are keeping somebody around that, like, that it's clear, and you just have to get clear, right? That's the only thing I think that like damages. Like, if you're bringing in your own kind of feelings or stories, right? It has to be very clear. I was clear about what the job entailed, right? So where did I fail? Not screening you, right? Not providing something. But I like to take extreme leadership, and if there's ever this type of a situation where there has to be a parting of the ways, right? That there's just a lot of clarity on both sides, so that at least you can both grow, right? You can definitely find the right person next time, and this other person knows, well, maybe I didn't screen this role correctly either, right? Like, I didn't ask all the questions.
Yeah, I can see that with the nurturing and the surrendering, right? You're in one hand, you're letting go of how it comes about, but in the other hand, you're nurturing it, you're taking care of it, you're giving what it needs. And part of that is being aware. It's hard to be a good gardener if you're not looking at your garden, right? If you allow the weeds to grow and you're out playing and you don't know how your garden's doing, so the weeds grow. And so part of nurture is looking at where the weeds grow within us too, and recognizing our own weaknesses, where as a leader, maybe I don't want to fire people because I don't like to hurt people. And I've been through that and I know what that feels like. So I have so much empathy that I can't do it. That might be an opportunity to have somebody do it for you, or to learn that skill. Like you said, it's a muscle to be able to do that for yourself and set whatever's going on in here aside for the the good of the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. It's heavy, right? And
yeah.
And for some people it's easy, right? And I love when you I mean that for some people it's easy to make that decision faster, and for some people it's much harder. But I love when you said, right, like you can get other people to support you in the areas that are hard. There's nothing wrong, right? So if you're a person, for example, that's like a little bit more like ruthless, right? You're like, hey, this isn't working, it's like I'm analyzing and it's not working, bye, then perhaps it's nicer to have someone else kind of cushion this or to give a different perspective. So to be a little bit more, humanistic and support you in that decision. And the other way around, right? If you're too much on that other end, right? Can someone a little bit more analytical help you or do it for you, right? There's no shame in getting help in the areas that you need. And of course, right, we always want to grow the things that we need, but you can get help.
Yeah. See, and that you can subsidize, right? Or get an assistant to help you with that as well. Or you can learn it. The challenge is there's a cost to everything, right? And so the time that it would take to learn those skills, some people are more adept at not learning that skill and doing something else, right? And hiring somebody to do that skill.
Yep. Not everyone's going to be an HR, because what we're talking about, right, is like in that space of HR, which is like needed, right, for like CEOs. Like there has to be like that capacity is helpful. But at the end of the day, your company is big enough, right? You don't have to right. At the end of the day, once you have an organization that's big enough, you have you have someone that's better than you in each of these head departments, and then you can stay with that strategic vision, right? It takes time to get there, but
I'm having the thought that if I were an employee of our company, not an owner, I would have been fired a long time ago. So we let ourselves off the hook quite a bit, right? And so having people in place to help out with that is big. Team members.
We get fired by our own assistant.
Right.
You're fired.
You wouldn't have hired yourself, possibly. I think that it's not even about being fired. I think about that all the time, and I think, I wouldn't have hired myself. I'm not looking for this skill set. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. Right. I mean, truly, it's stepping back and just looking at the reality of it, and objectively, without judgment, without shame, without justification. You're just looking at what is and really just measuring that and trying to figure out what does this need to make it grow the way it needs to grow, and give it that. And so I want to ask you, as we wrap up here, why are you doing all this? What is your legacy with this? What gift are you giving to the world with what you're doing?
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to answer that question. I think about it a lot. And, I think that a lot of the times we're inspired by our past experiences. And for me as an assistant, it was when I was working as an assistant, it was a very kind of eye-opening experience. And I felt like there was no pain kind of bigger than having to feel like you have to hide parts of yourself at work and in certain areas of your life. And so it feels like my mission to create environments and to inspire business owners to create their own environments and their organizations where people can bring their full selves, right? There's still a conversation of, I'm going to wear this mask at home and this mask, with friends, and this mask at work, right? And I think that the younger generations are not doing that anymore, right? They want to bring their full selves, but we need to kind of like rehabilitate the culture of existing organizations, right? And so that's the conversation that's interesting for me. That's where I feel that's where I feel time is well spent, having these conversations, so that if we're always going to have stressors in our lives, I desire to live in a world where we can eliminate as much as possible the stress that goes into our work relationships, so that we can bring our full selves to our home, to our spouses, to our kids, to our communities. And
I like that. You're talking about separating or blending together the worlds of talent and humanness, right? Whatever your mindset plus the talent, the skill set. And there is a blending of those two worlds. And I think you're right. A lot more people are waking up to wanting to matter, wanting to feel like they're important, that they're human. Because for a long time there, it didn't. I worked at organizations where you didn't matter. You were a cog in the wheel and that you can be replaced, and you felt like that. And so you only wanted to give what you wanted to give. They call it quiet quitting now. Well, it's what people have always done. It's not quiet quitting. It's just when people make you not matter, you make them not matter. It's a human thing, right? So I appreciate that, because you really are bringing in the humanness to what you're doing. And that in itself will create, I think, less friction, right? And you're not letting go of the talent side either. Like, that's what I love about what you're doing, is you're blending those two worlds seamlessly. It's awesome. Did you have any other thoughts you want to share today?
No, thank you for saying it in that way. And no, this was such an energizing conversation. You guys just really, kind of set up my Sunday in this very thoughtful way, and I think that's
Cool.
why your community really connects, because you bring in the fun, but there's also this depth in conversation. So this was very meaningful and fun for me
Cool.
to interact with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ryan, do you have other thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, quick is just, like a lot of this boils down to awareness, and for that friction less is awareness. You can start to see it in yourself, like what's going on, and be more aware, so that there is less friction, not only inside of you, but also in your organization, whatever that looks like for you. And so I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate what you're doing, and for all the help that you're giving to other people, and for spending the time with us, because we say this all the time, and that's the most valuable gift that you can give, is to give your time. So thank you for whoever is helping you, or your assistant, or in your life, family, friends, everyone who sacrificed some time so that you could be here today. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. For those that are watching, as always, remember, you're right where you need to be. You have everything you need already around you. So now it's just a matter of stepping. Sic parvis magna, right? From small things come great. You don't have to take big steps. Anything will do. And then just adjust from there. Just as a wrap up here, if you haven't joined the newsletter yet, go to the website, giantsandsmalls.com, and do that. And we won't flood you with information, but we also might flood you with information. So kind of a paradox. we love you. Thanks for being a part of our journey. Please share this with anybody that you feel would benefit from this conversation. And if you're not a member of the Tribe of Giants, come over to Facebook and join us. We have a great global community of people doing good in the world. So make it a giant day. We'll see you in the next video.
Love you too.